Today's topic is an economic analysis of the recent Karnataka elections. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be with you once again. And today I have with me a distinguished economist who lives in Bangalore, India. He will analyze the economic aspects of the recent election in which the BJP lost and the Congress won. We will keep away from politics and focus on economics. He's Professor Narendra Pani. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur, for having me. I'm basically someone who has worked from Bangalore and looking primarily at inequality and what it does to growth. And one of the aspects that we have been worried about to some extent is a reliance all through India on a strategy where you take growth at any cost, irrespective of its employment generation or its regional dispersion. You take growth at any cost. And then having generated a surplus, you try to divert a part of it to the poorest and hope that therefore you will end up with a growth process which is not entirely impossible for the poor to bear.
Now, just a minute, Professor, let me translate it into simple language. By sharing the surplus, you mean subsidies?
Need not be. It could be fresh investment in other areas. It could be investment in, say, housing, which need not, because if you use the term subsidies, a large part of the subsidies in India go to the rich.
No, I'm talking about like Narendra.
Yes, that is a part of it, but I'm just avoiding the term simply because it is an umbrella term, and it's very often used as if we are supporting the poor when a large part of it goes to the non-poor.
Okay, fine. All right.
So it's just a question of any part of the surplus being moved in the. That's a broad strategy, and now that's so Karnataka, in a sense, is the sort of leader of this kind of a strategy, in the sense that it had a well-established technical manpower base. So when the communication revolution came around, it was able to tap into that and grow very rapidly. So Bangalore is the capital, and that began to form the growth for the state as a whole. So today, for instance, Bangalore accounts for around more than a third, well above a third of the state's economy. Right, so it's very Bangalore-centric. And the way that happens is that in order to capture the global market and global investors, it tries to be very much in tune with the West, very much in tune with the advanced world. And its investments in infrastructure are designed to present it as a city that the advanced world can relate to. In the process, it has made living in the city extremely expensive. You have one of the highest costs of water, one of the highest costs of transportation. And so as a result of this process, you end up with those being pushed out of agriculture and the rest of Karnataka finding it difficult to make their way into the city. They are not, so the normal expectation of large-scale migration from the poorer areas to the city does not come about. It also does not come about because the city's growth is around information technology, which people leaving agriculture don't have the skills to enter. So you have a problem there of a very unequal growth. It's a growth that's hidden in numbers. You get very high growth rates, you get very high per capita income, but at the same time, you actually have very high levels of exclusion. As a result of which, since 1991, every single state government in Karnataka has been thrown out. It has no government has been re-elected since liberalization began. So this is the kind of situation in which you found people have then resorted to other issues to try and get to power. You could use religion, you could use other things, but as you said, that's not our topic for today. What we are trying to say really is that what does this do? If you have an incumbency factors against the government, all governments, it has led in the past to multiple parties emerging and tapping into it. But this time there was a change, and that change occurred, I think, the change was triggered in some sense by Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Yatra. because when he walked through the state, he covered something like 21 constituencies. I mean, it was a straight geometrical line from the south to the north, but essentially it led to covering that many constituencies. And talking to the people, it became very clear that there was an economic crisis, irrespective of the state being one of the most rapidly growing ones in the country. And therefore, he went along with the local leadership, who was one of whom was the former chief minister, who had actually used welfare schemes for food, right? And that led to a package of 5 guarantees that the Congress offered in terms of, I think the guarantees were quite wide-ranging, from support for graduates to support for women heads of households, etc. And that is what has contributed to the victory. But whether that can be sustained is another issue, because where are the resources going to come from? Because the strategy of growth at any cost is itself reaching a kind of point of diminishing returns. Because essentially you put all your resources into a single city, and you have raised in trying to make the city like one of the leading cities in the world. You have made everything so expensive that it has lost its advantage with cheaper cities it is competing with. Okay. So it is trying to look like New York without the operating at New York's end of the economy.
Yeah.
You're functioning primarily on the cost advantage, but you're trying to spend like one of the Western metropolises. So in that kind of a process, you're beginning to lose your cost advantage. You're beginning to have difficulty attracting labor. And the previous government went so far as to introduce laws that allowed for 12-hour work days. Now that is something almost industrial revolution conditions, and the people have rejected it very strongly in this election. So that's really, if you want an event-based summary of what happened this week in Karnataka's election, or the economics of what happened in the election, I suppose that would be.
I think you are very clear on this, that it's really, the government is more focused on economic growth around Bangalore and unable to deliver enough to those who cannot be part of Bangalore, right? They are just marginalized for whatever reason outside. And so you really have 2 Karnatakas, one concentration of wealth and the other is just people who cannot get enough.
Which is, sorry, but this is reflected in the political, in the patterns, in the election patterns, because in Bangalore, the BJP actually saw an increase in the number of seats it had won. Out of the 28 seats that are there in the city, it won 11 in 2018, and this time it won 16. So it is a substantial increase in number of seats. Whereas outside Bangalore, it was a halving of the seats of the BJP. So that pattern is very clear, directly linked to this economic process.
Okay, I mean, that's a very good detailed analysis that you have seen. By the way, you mentioned Rahul Gandhi's march as a campaign thing. Do you remember anything from the BJP side that was about economics?
They have not actually, as you probably as you are and certain aware, India has a long tradition of padayatras or long walks where you meet people, and in the going back to Gandhi's Dandi March and probably even earlier in history. And this was designed in that thing. The BJP's response has primarily been more, to put it crudely, motorized. I mean, they have had these road shows and very expensive and glamorous sort of displays of their leaders, and it's a tool that catches a lot of attention, but doesn't necessarily connect with local issues. Okay. And it is interesting that the BJP did not offer any welfare schemes as a part of its strategy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. That did they offer any schemes to the masses as part of it?
Not really. They seem to think that essentially it was a matter of the political, the religious, and the charisma of the prime minister.
Okay, well, that's I'm glad that you have spoken so clearly about this. Because I think people don't really know this, because all the News sites are full of politics and sociology and religion, and the economics of it, which is actually quite fundamental, it really gets hidden. Any final words from you on this?
Nothing, except that I think there is this kind of one of the reasons why something as fundamental as this has been ignored for over 3 decades. I think is primarily because we tend to look at politics as a national process. We tend to identify national, not just national parties, but national figures. And even regional parties are determined in terms of the importance of regional figures is determined in terms of whether they can have a national impact. So the national is certainly important, but it's made up of what's happening locally. And if the local is ignored on a large scale, you could end up with sudden disruptions across the country. And I think it's important that as they make themselves heard within the electoral process, they are heard, there's a response to them before they are sort of pushed outside the electoral process.
Okay, that's very good. So, Professor, let me say thank you. Let me say bye to our viewers, and you can join me in saying bye, and we will end it here for today. I'll be back with today itself with another professor from Bangalore, Professor Vinod Vyasulu. You may know him perhaps.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
we will discuss, let's see what he has to say. Okay.
Thank you very much for having me. And
okay,
thank
so
you.
bye. Okay.